Okay, here we go.
Okay.
So I'm going to give it a few minutes just to make sure it's caught up to me. Yep. Okay, good evening, everybody. This is Heather Leigh from Ghost Education 101, and we are here today with author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. And I'm going to do a quick introduction about him, and then I will let him take over. We're going to be talking about shadow people today, but let me tell you a little bit about him first. He's an author of the best-selling book, A Walk in the Shadows, a complete guide to shadow people, and the historical books, Ghost of Maryland, Ghosts and Legends of Oklahoma, Campfire Tales, Midwest, Ghost Story and Case Files, the Encounters with the Paranormal series. He has appeared on multiple television shows and programs as a paranormal historian, including Travel Channel's The Alaska Triangle, Animal Planet's The Haunted, Bio Channel's My Ghost Story, and Ren TV's From Russia, Mysteries of Mankind, as well as Fox 5 News in Washington, Fox 25 News in Oklahoma City, and ABC News 3 in Virginia Beach, as well as other radio shows. He also produces his own internet paranormal shows called Ghost and Legends, Paranormal Roads, and Friday Night Ghost Frights. On Tuesday nights, he hosts the Edge of the Rabbit Hole live stream show and Beyond the Shadows on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel. And Haunted Road Media is his own paranormal and supernatural book publishing and video production company representing a number of paranormal authors, and also won the award for excellent media in the paranormal field at the 2019 Shockfest Film Festival. Okay. He has historic paranormal articles that have been published in the Baltimore Sun, Paranormal Underground magazine, and he has previously wrote an Oklahoma City paranormal column for Examiner.com from 2010 to 2014. His work has been featured in the Oklahoman, the Frederick News Post, Marshall University's The Parthenon, and Louisiana State University's Civil War Book Review. Additionally, he is an Amazon best-selling mystery author with 2 series in his Chase Michael DeBarlo private detective series, Deadly Airs and System of the Dead. With nearly 30 years of involvement in the paranormal, he serves as a paranormal investigator and ghost historian, I love that term, with the Society of the Haunted, and regularly travels to speak about supernatural phenomenon. As a native of Cleveland, Ohio, he is the father of 4 and is an avid baseball fan. So we will make sure that we share this bio on our Ghost Education 101 page, as well as all of the links to his social media and website. But now I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, Heather. And thanks for reading all that. It's quite a bit. People ask me to send a bio along, and, I'll shoot the whole thing. And usually people only take like maybe a paragraph or a few sentences, but you read that whole thing. So
I tried to edit it, but it was just too good not to share.
I appreciate that. So, we're going to be talking about shadow people this evening. And like I was telling you before the show, that I really haven't presented this in almost a year because of COVID and everything. I had my workshop last month, which is a much more expansive version of this, but this is really going to be like the first time I've done this presentation in months. But I talk about shadow people all the time, of course. So hopefully, my memory will be jogged. But let me go ahead and I guess we'll do a screen share here. And I'll bring up the presentation. So let's see, share that. And there we go. So I'm hoping everybody can see my PowerPoint, and I guess I need to start the slideshow here. So from beginning, okay. And yeah, because I'm only using one monitor, I don't know the slide that's coming up next. So here we go with shadow people. So these are some of the most, enigmatic and mysterious beings that we talk about these days in the paranormal and supernatural community, and for good reason. We're going to get into a lot of those different reasons, but to give you a little background about myself, I want to tell you about some experiences that I had that kind of set me off down this path. So when I was about 8 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw something pretty close to this standing in the corner of my room. This is a artist illustration by Adam Tillery. He's a fantastic artist, and he drew a representation of what I saw that night. The only thing that's a little bit different is I didn't see any eyes or the mouth. He kind of put those in there, which is fine. But I saw this dark, tall figure standing in the corner of my room. Being the age that I was at years old, I had no idea from shadow people or anything like that. I just thought there was an intruder in my room and it was about to kill me. That's about what you think at that age. Of course, it didn't, and I'm still alive to tell the tale, which is great, of course. But it did something really bizarre after that. It actually approached my bed, came right up to me, leaned over, and I'm looking up into this thing. It's all dark. Again, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, no details you could tell. I'm trying to scream. My mouth opens up, nothing comes out, and it actually grabbed me by the wrists, ended up pulling my arms across my body, and crossed my arms across my body like that. And then it ran off down the hall. I turned my head and I watched it go into all places a closet, which again, really bizarre. So I found my voice, found my legs, ran off to my parents' bedroom, screaming about what had happened. Of course, they told me that I had just had a bad dream. They're being good parents, nice, and trying to console me. And um, that was their take on it, was that I had just had a bad dream. But this was something that I was completely awake for. I had woke up from sleeping and experienced this. And we'll get into some different details about this as we go along, because people start asking about sleep paralysis and things like that, which I didn't actually have during this incident. So we'll get into those details later. But that was not my only shadow person incident as a kid. I had another one when I was 13 years old. We were actually moving from this house in Massachusetts to a newer house in Ohio. And that house in Massachusetts, I could never say was haunted. That was my only experience there. But in Ohio, as we're moving in, I'm just in my bedroom putting boxes away, or unpacking boxes, putting things away, and I kept seeing something standing in the doorway of my bedroom. And anytime I would turn, look, it would just take off down the hall. It would run. It would run away. And this happened several times. I'd be putting things away, unpacking boxes, and there would be the thing standing in my doorway, and it would just take off down the hall whenever I would look at it. So after this happening over the course of a couple days, maybe 5, 6, 7 times, something like that, I wasn't counting. Um, I went and asked my mother about it, and I guess maybe she thought I was a little bit more mature at that time, and she told me that she had actually seen the same thing, which was great for me. It was affirmation that I wasn't actually crazy. Uh, the other good thing about it was that she didn't seem very worried about it. She was just kind of, "Oh yeah, I've seen that too." So it told me there wasn't really much to worry about. I mean, it was running off away from me anyway, so it didn't seem like there was anything to fear, and my mother didn't seem to be afraid of it. So I actually got playful with this thing, and anytime I'd see it standing in my doorway after that, I would call it Tom. I'd say, "Hey, Tom," as like peeping Tom, and I'd wave, and he'd take off down the hall. That activity lasted for about 3 or 4 months and then just subsided. So I chalked it up to something that was in the house, was curious about us, deemed that we were an okay family, and then went about its business. Didn't see it again the rest of the time that I lived there. I lived there for 5 years until I graduated high school. My parents lived there for another couple years after that until they moved into another house, and so that was it with Tom. So two interesting and very different shadow people incidents when I was a kid. I've had many more incidents and experiences with shadow people as a paranormal investigator. We'll get into some of those as we go along with this as well. Just real quick, how I got into the paranormal. Of course, these couple incidents are, you know, were certainly influential. My mother, when we made that trip out of Massachusetts into Ohio, she bought me the book Yankee Ghost by Hans Holzer, which I'm reading it as we're driving out of Massachusetts into New York, and it was a couple stories into it, and I started realizing, oh, these are actually true stories, not just cool ghost stories of New England. Um, and so I became absolutely fascinated with that. But when I want to say I was about 15 years old, and my friend David and I were at our friend Lori's house, and we're just kind of shooting the breeze in her living room, and talking about team drama and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, she says, "I think my house is haunted." And we were absolutely fascinated by this, and we're asking, "Okay, well, what happens in the house?" She starts telling us about how there's an old family graveyard in the backyard because an old historic uh, house in the downtown area of the town in which we lived. And then started telling us about how anytime she would tack something up on this one wall in her bedroom, it would always fall down off the wall. It could be like an hour, a day, a week, whatever. It would always eventually fall off of her wall. So she thought her wall was haunted. So here we go. We're going to go off and we're going to investigate. So David and I go up there, and we're checking out the room, we're checking out the things that she's trying to tack up on the wall. And David, I didn't realize this about him at the time, but he's very sensitive, and he put his hand just flat to the wall, just to touch it, and all of a sudden he turned this bright red and started sweating profusely. I'm looking at David like, oh my god, what's going on with my friend? I'd never seen anything like this before. And so he started going like wall to wall to wall in the house to see if there were any other hotspots like this. And so this was our first little, paranormal investigation. Again, we didn't really realize what we were doing at the time, or that's what you called it. And that was the moment that I really knew that this was something I was going to be involved with for the rest of my life. I was absolutely fascinated, and this was something I was going to pursue as I got older. And so I've been involved with it ever since. So, what we're going to do with this particular presentation, we're going to get into the different types of shadow people, type of phenomenon, experiences that I've had, stories that people have related to me. Then we're going to get into briefly some different concepts as to who or what they may be. We will get into sleep paralysis and just real briefly touch on a little bit of world history. Um, so the types of shadow people, there are many, many types. You can already tell from a couple of stories that I told that the two experiences that I had when I was a child were quite different. You had one that was extremely interactive, which is what we would call the humanoid figure. It looked like a person, even though you couldn't see any facial features. It had that distinct outline of a human being. It was fairly solid. The whole touching my arms and things like that, the wrists and pulling them across my body, people will ask me, what it felt like to feel cold, to feel electric, anything like that. And no, it felt just like any other person touching me, like a regular human being had, grabbed me by the wrist and pulled my arms across my body. It just, felt like that kind of pressure. So, these are kind of the characteristics of humanoid figure. People will wake up, we'll see them standing in the corner of the room like I did at the end of their bed. Sometimes people will see them standing in the corner, or I'm sorry, in the doorway, like I experienced at the other house. Although that one at that house was a little bit different. We'll get into that soon. Or they may see one walking down the hall, standing at a window, and it just looks like a person, but no features. Everything is black, and that's what we call the humanoid figure. And I've actually captured one on camera. This is a really fascinating photo here. This was at the Campsville Grade School in Campsville, Illinois, during a paranormal investigation about 4.5 years ago. And uh, actually, I take that back. It was a little over 4 years ago. My first investigation there was 4.5 years ago. This one was a follow-up investigation. But in any case, um, this school is no longer in operation, hadn't been for several years, and was just kind of being used by the city for various things. I say city, but really it's a village. And we can't get in there now because the local archaeological society actually operates it now. But before they took over, we'd done several investigations there. And this photo is from the gym. Now it's hard to see, but behind the shadow figure that you see in the photo is a set of double doors that leads to the boys' locker room and then down to the basement area. And we kept hearing all kinds of activity going on by those doors. So we would go over by the doors, do a little EVP work and what have you. And all of a sudden we'd be hearing things over by the bleachers. And so we'd go back over to the bleachers. And then we would start hearing things by the door. So it was playing with us because we were back and forth throughout the gym this whole time. Well, this one particular occasion, we're over there by the bleachers. And again, we're hearing things over by the door. We decided, okay, we're not going to go back over there. We're just going to stay at the bleachers and see what we can get. And we were calling across the room. And as I'm panning the video camera, this is actually a still from a video clip. You can actually see this shadow person walking a little bit in the frame. Now, I didn't see it with my own eyes. It was in review later on that we saw it. So I had no idea that I was actually capturing a shadow person at the time. But once we saw that on film, we have clips of it on some of our videos on the Hun Road Media channel. And then I took this still so we could have it in the presentation here. And we ended up going back, doing some height comparisons to, see how tall this thing is. And it's really about the height of maybe a 10-year-old child. So makes sense in a school. Um, you know it was an old elementary school, so that being a child makes a lot of sense. And yes, some shadow people are human spirits. We'll get into the differences between like human spirits and interdimensional beings and all that a little bit later, but this was a fantastic capture. And there again, when it comes to paranormal evidence and trying to capture something on film, very very difficult. I've been doing this for years and years and years, and all of the hours of video that you take and thousands of photos that you snap, you only end up with a handful of things, and this was a fascinating one. So then there is the Hat Man. This one is pretty much the most notorious of the lot. And he usually seems to be a more nefarious type of shadow person. And not all shadow people are nasty and nefarious. We'll get into that as well. But this one typically is. And uh, we usually attribute him to being some sort of energy vampire that he will come into your room, sometimes flanked with other shadow entities, but come into the room, stand near you at the bed or at the edge of the bed, somewhere near you, and strikes fear into you and feeds off of that fear. At least that's the going theory that we have right now. There are a variety of different hat styles that he may don. Most typically, what people report is wearing the fedora, sometimes wearing a trench coat, sometimes not. Other times you've seen in a top hat, sometimes in a cape, sometimes not. And then I've heard another one that he wears sometimes is a wide brim hat. I've even heard reports of a archer type hat, like something out of Robin Hood, which is really different. I've only heard that once. Um, so a lot of different varieties of hats. As far as why he wears different hats, there's a lot of different theories as whether he's trying to mask his identity. I say he, but really these are a number of different hat entities. There's not just one hat guy running around. There's several of these. Um, or whether another theory is he was familiar with us in another uh, point in our history, got familiar with the customs of that time, and now as he's appearing these days, he's shown in those other customs. So there's a lot of different theories as to why he wears the different types of hats, but he is considered one of the more nefarious and is an energy vampire, so somebody that feeds off of your energy. Sometimes he does have red eyes as well. You'll hear reports occasionally of the Hat Man with red eyes, and we'll get into the red eyes here in just a moment. There's also the hooded figure. People seem to fear the hooded figure as well because they associate it with the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper is not a shadow person. The Grim Reaper is actually a psychopomp, which is really a fancy term for an entity who guides your soul in the afterlife to take you to the other side. So Grim Reaper is just really doing his job. He's not he's actually not evil or anything like that. But unfortunately, the hooded figure kind of gets lumped into that. And I've heard mixed reports with the hooded figure. So I haven't actually seen the hooded figure myself, but from the stories that I've heard, um, there is an incident, one particular story in which the hooded figure had taken a woman by her ankles. He was standing at the end of her bed, took her by the ankles, and raised her up off the bed. That's one of the that's probably actually the most severe. But there are other cases in which hooded figure was seen as more benevolent, in which um, this one woman, her son was experiencing all kinds of health issues, and she kept seeing this hooded shadow figure in her house, and she thought it was there for her young son. And what actually ended up happening, because he was going into the boy's room, nothing would end up happening to the boy. But what ended up happening was because he was always at the doctor's, running a bunch of different tests. And this one particular time, when they were at the doctor's office, they were going to run the same series of tests again. And then all of a sudden, the doctor kind of turned his head as if somebody was whispering in his ear, and then turned around and said, this time let's run this other series of tests. And they actually ended up discovering there was something else wrong with the boy, something that was actually treatable. And then everything was okay with him. And she never saw the hooded shadow figure again. And what she believes is that even though she couldn't see it in the doctor's office, she thought that that hooded figure actually whispered into the doctor's ear. And then, they were able to treat the boy, so that this was actually a more benevolent thing. This particular illustration is um, from one of our books, one of our Encounters with the Paranormal books. Actually, I take that back. This is from My Life Amidst the Paranormal by Kat Gash. And this was an incident that she had at a abandoned monastery. Actually, it was abandoned abbey in Ireland, in which this hooded figure, obviously one of the monks there that had been at the abbey, had actually caught her arm as she was slipping down the stairs and prevented her from falling completely down the stairs. So, not what I would call a true shadow person, but a shadowy figure in the hood, that really would have been like a ghost that would have saved her. So they seem to be. It's a mixed bag with the hooded figures, but seem to be more benevolent at times, or at least more benign. Then there is the mist. This one's kind of interesting, in which sometimes when we are, we could be at a historical location, we could be, doing a paranormal investigation, what have you, and all of a sudden, we see this dark mist that's almost like a black cloud. This particular incident here that's being illustrated was during one of the investigations that we ran for the case that ended up being featured on The Haunted. And what was going on in this particular bedroom was the adult daughter was being terrorized by a dark entity with red eyes. Well, this one particular investigation, we are, um, we're following the cat around because it's all kinds of skittish, got spooked, watching it run uh, from the kitchen area into the dining room area over by the bedrooms. And all of a sudden, it stops right in front of the door to the girl's bedroom. And I kind of tagged along behind it, and I look into the room, and I saw what stopped it dead in its tracks was this dark mist hovering in the room. And I did feel, definitely a heaviness, and it ended up just dissipating. The way the cat took off kind of around the corner, around the wall, into the living room. And I got silly and tried to snap a photo with a flash, which kind of obliterated the whole thing. It wasn't smart, but it did end up, after the flash subsided, you did kind of see the end of the black mist, finishing uh, finishing it subsiding. So I think the next slide I think the next slide is the clip of this. So, okay, yeah, deleted scene with the cat. So this was a scene that they actually did not end up showing on that episode of The Haunted, which was called Monster in the Closet, which was a little silly because it was a show that aired on Animal Planet, and this was a clear interaction with the cat. So, but I did get a DVD of this and have included. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. I don't know how the sound is going to work through here, but I do have a video clip of that, so we'll see if the sound works here. Okay. Yeah, that was over 10 years ago now. So it was a little while ago. All right, let's see if we can get to the next slide here. Okay, okay, that's strange. So it played the clip in the viewer, and the next slide had the clip. So, okay, I'm not sure what happened there, but we'll move on. Okay, the entity with red eyes. Like I said, the primary haunting of that house was a dark entity with red eyes. This was terrorizing Taliesin, the cat. Other members of the household had seen this entity. There were a lot of other things that were going on within that house as well, for over a 20-year period of time, which was really interesting because they had been experiencing things all that time and they just weren't talking with each other. Um, and finally, one day at dinner, you know, the activity had heightened so much that finally somebody said, "Hey, I've been experiencing this," and all of a sudden, just all these stories started coming from all sorts of people. Now, the older brother who used to sleep in that bedroom before he moved out had experienced one time what he called a wrestling match that he couldn't see. That there was all kinds of fighting going on. Things were getting knocked over in the room, but he couldn't see who it was. That was all invisible to him. A lot of tragedy in that house. In that particular bedroom was a confirmed suicide. It was the original homeowner's father had taken his life in that room. There was another attempted suicide in that house, and then a another uh, accidental suicide in one of the closets that we couldn't confirm. A retired police officer told us about it, but we couldn't ever confirm it with any sort of documentation. So the house had a lot of dark history. And so we were trying to determine whether or not the entity that was there was, a nasty human spirit or if it was something demonic. And it turned out after many, many investigations, and I do want to stress this, that you're not just going to walk into a location and immediately know this is a demon. It took us many, many investigations to determine that yes, this thing is actually demonic. We wanted to rule out some of the other things first, because of the history of the house, of course. And at the end, we ended up having Carl Johnson, a renowned demonologist, come in and help us cleanse the house. Um, but the entities with red eyes are usually seen, of course, as something more evil and nefarious. There are different colored eyes as well. So people report seeing yellow eyes, blue eyes, purple eyes, and people try to relate the different colors to um, different agendas that the entities may have. I'm not so sure about that. I think it's one of those that as humans, we like to categorize. Obviously, I'm categorizing here with the different types of entities, but the colors, at least from all the reports that I've gathered over the years, the colors don't seem to matter as to what the entity does. They all seem to have their own agendas. Even some reports with the entities with red eyes just standing there like other shadow people, and just watching and not actually doing anything. But the one in that particular case was certainly more nefarious. Then there is the wisp. Excuse me a moment while I grab a sip of water here. So the wisp is more of what I saw in my bedroom at the house in Ohio, the one that I called Tom. When I would turn in, I'd see it just dart down the hall. He was more of the wisp type. He was very translucent. You could see the shape of a body there, although many of the features were vague, like even more vague than a solid humanoid figure. A lot of people will see this as just something quick, darting, again like down a hall, across a room. Um, they're just like in the blink of an eye. And one of the more significant places that I've seen a wisp, again on a paranormal investigation, this was at Johnny V's in Muskogee, Oklahoma. It was a restaurant, no longer in business. But we were just finishing up a paranormal investigation there. A couple guys were up in the bar area on the second floor. A couple of others were out in the front restaurant area, and I was doing a final photo sweep of the restaurant when I walked through the main doors of the kitchen, and all of a sudden I saw this just wisp of a shadow just dart right across the room, and boom, slam into this flimsy metal door. You can see the metal door here in the photo, and it was just very thin, very flimsy. It was meant for waiters and waitresses to walk through out into the side dining room area with large trays of food. You just tap it with your finger and the thing would move. Well, what was interesting about that, and we'll get into some theories as to why this happened. What was very interesting about that is that even though you heard that slam of the door didn't actually move. I do have an audio clip here. I don't know. Again, hopefully the sound will play here. So you'll hear me call out to the others, hey, did you hear that? And they'll say, yeah, yeah, we heard that. And I start describing to them a little bit about what had happened to me, what I had observed, and I start, even questioning them about, did you guys throw something, down at the door? I start thinking that maybe they were messing with me and that they had thrown something at the door to try to spook me or whatever. But, and of course they said that they hadn't. And even if they had, the door would have moved because it was just that flimsy. I actually walked out through the door and looking around on the ground, and there's nothing there. So I'll play this audio clip, and hopefully you guys will hear it here. You'll hear that bang. I wasn't running video, like I said, I was in a photo sweep, so I only have the audio from it. It wants me to open this in Office. What is this? Oh, okay. We'll try this. Okay, so that's the bang of the door, and like I said, a little bit further in this presentation, we'll get into some different theories as to what happened there, and this is really for me kind of that crux as to why I believe a quote unquote true shadow person is an interdimensional being. Then there is the crawler. This one's been getting a lot more attention, a lot more questions lately. So people will ask me, is there, a crawler outbreak these days? And I think, no, it's just, more people are feeling more comfortable with reporting this type of phenomenon. Other people have now shared their stories, and now other people are saying, yeah, I've actually had that experience too. And this photo here is just from somewhere on the internet, not my photo, but it's pretty similar as to what I saw at a location known as Black Bear Church. And basically, these things are just really kind of like their namesake. They are dark entities that crawl along the walls, along ceilings. People have reported seeing them, walk crab-like along the floor, things like that. And where I saw this was at Black Bear Church in Olive Township, Oklahoma. The photo on the right is it's a cool illuminated ball of light. I don't adhere much to orb photos at all, but this one has its own luminescence. It was the very first photo I took there right as I walked in to the church. Boom, there it was. But in any case, one of our investigations there, we actually experienced this crawler. Now, this crawler is kind of like a local legend there. Um, you could kind of see the stairs off to the right hand side of that photo with the illuminated ball of light, and that leads into a little back room with a it's a brick pedestal with a concrete slab on top of it, and we have found there evidence. Well, I say evidence, but stuff that kind of adheres to this legend of people conjuring this crawler, that they were practicing black magic there and they were able to conjure this crawler and these little minion shadow people. And while we can't confirm that that truly happened, we have found evidence of burn marks on that pedestal, some burnt animal bones. I mean, somebody could have just been, burning chicken from their KFC or something. We don't know because we weren't there, but it plays into the story, into the legend. And we only experienced this crawler the one time that we've investigated there, and we investigated there, several times. But the one time we were down in the basement area, which is this photo on the bottom left, and you can kind of see, well, you can see there at this Mountain Dew bottle that's there. And what ended up happening was, as we were investigating in this basement area, we saw the shadow slip in through one of the windows, and it started circling us along the walls, along the ceiling. Um, it ended up kicking that bottle across the floor at one point. We heard it bang into the metal railing leading down there at one point. The psychic medium that was with us suggested that we start saying prayers, singing hymns to lighten the atmosphere and chase this thing off, which we ended up doing, and it ended up slipping right back out that window. So now we didn't see the little shadow minions that are supposed to be with it. The legend is that the abandoned church is the crawler's domain, and then these shorter shadow entities come up to the church but don't go in it, and they'll peer in through the windows. We didn't, really see any of those. People have also reported as they drive away, these shadow entities will scratch at their cars. We didn't see any of that either, but we did experience the crawler there at Black Bear Church. All right, then there is the old hag, and this is what gets us into sleep paralysis. We'll see if I can remember the order of these slides here. So, old hag syndrome. This is when somebody wakes up in the middle of the night, and there's this basically like a crusty old woman sitting on their chest, or the ghoul, as depicted here in Henry Fuseli's famous Nightmare painting. Sometimes people will see just a shadow sitting on their chest, and it's pressing them down into the bed. And this is why it's usually associated with sleep paralysis, that many, many times people cannot move while this thing is sitting on their chest. And I've even had a report over the last couple of years now of one instance in which a woman woke up and had a dire wolf sitting on her chest. Her husband woke up to her thrashing about trying to get this thing off of her chest. Um, and he couldn't see what was there. So he turned on the light. What he ended up seeing was the impressions of the paw prints on her shoulders. And turning on the light ended up scaring it off. But even though he didn't see the direwolf itself, he ended up seeing the impressions from the paw prints, which is really, really interesting. Because so many of these experiences people experience alone. So when there is a witness there, that's really, really important to my research. But something that's really interesting to me um, is that the uh, the stories of the old hag are something that people have experienced around the world for thousands and thousands of years. Cultures that have not that or at least didn't interact with each other or had no connection to each other over thousands of years, yet we're still experiencing the same phenomenon. Um, there's the unfortunate the medical community likes to say that um, well, because we're going to get to sleep paralysis here in just a little bit. They like to say that when people wake up in the middle of the night and they see a shadow person or experience the old hag, it's really just that they are um, having that hallucination coming out of the dream state, and that these things aren't real. But yet, here we have over all of these thousands of years, all the same type of phenomenon that people are describing. Now, they may have a different name for it, and they may have some other, like, legends that go along with it, that kind of enhance the tale, but it's all really the same. Um, witch riding, which is Thailand, they call Fayam. Vietnam, Bong Day, held down by shadow. Turkey calls it a Karabasan, the dark presser. Brazil, the Pisadira, old hag who steps on chest. So it's all the same phenomenon over all of these different cultures for all time, which to me is really interesting. So sleep paralysis, like I was saying, now this is a real phenomenon. This does really happen to people. It is truly a biological thing that happens. It's actually very natural. When we go to sleep and have actually fallen asleep, our body paralyzes us to try to prevent us from acting out our dreams in the middle of the night. And what ends up happening for people who end up experiencing sleep paralysis while being awake, usually it's while you're waking up, coming out of your sleep state, that your body is still paralyzed. I've had it happen a couple times the opposite way, and it can happen this way, in which your body's so exhausted it just shuts down, goes into that paralysis mode, but your mind is still awake and aware of everything going on around you. And the first time that happened to me, was very, very frightening. I was only about 20, 21 years old. And I was actually at work at the time. And this was back when I was in the Air Force. So I could have gotten in a lot of trouble for just, being asleep on the job, especially in the military. And I wasn't sure what in the world had just happened to me, because I was just sitting there, and then all of a sudden, boom, I was out, but still awake, which was really disconcerting. So basically, it was like, um, I couldn't move, and everything was dark. Um, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I could hear everything that was going around me. Didn't see anything, so I didn't see any shadow people or anything like that. What I ended up doing to try to get out of this, once I kind of tried to calm my nerves down, is I just tried to see if I could wiggle a toe. And once I was finally able to do that and establish that, which took a lot of effort, I tried to wiggle another. And then, okay, let's see if I can move my foot a little bit. And okay, let's see if I can move, my ankle, and just I kind of slowly worked up my body from my feet to my legs, to my torso, and finally, all the way up to my head, when I was able to wake up. Um, Happened again in my later 30s. It was still it was a bit disconcerting, but I wasn't as worried that second time around, because it already happened to me once, and so I just did the same thing to get myself out of it, and I was able to wake myself up. Again, didn't see any shadow people that time. So I have experienced real sleep paralysis. I do know what it's all about. Um, I What I have a problem with when it comes to the medical community, what they say about sleep paralysis and shadow people, is they will say that, well, your your body, as it's coming out of the sleep state, is still paralyzed, but your mind is still dreaming. It's still hallucinating, and so the figures that you see in your room are just part of your dream. It's just a hallucination. But the problem I have there is, I dream about all kinds of different things while I'm asleep. It's not just people. I dream about cars or airplanes or trees, or, I've had dreams of being on stage with Motley Crue, and I've never woken up and haven't had 10,000 people in my room with, all the pyrotechnics and the drum kit and the guitars and all that. I mean, it would be really cool. But that's never happened. And I've never had, a plane, buzz my bed, or train go through my room or anything like that. It's always a person that people report seeing when they wake up. So I don't believe it's just a hallucination like that. What I think ends up happening, because like I said, sleep paralysis is a real thing. I think what's going on here, and people who have had uh, small children will, certainly relate to this. Um, my kids, especially my youngest Cameron, when they would come to wake me up in the middle of the night, maybe they'd had a bad dream or something like that. Um, they wouldn't immediately like tap me on the shoulder or uh, kind of rustle me awake or something like that. Uh, Cameron especially would just stand there at the side of the bed, and all of a sudden I would just wake up and be like, "Oh, God, Cameron, what are you doing?" What had woken me up was his presence. I had felt his energy near the bed, and that's what woke me up. So I think what's happening here with these shadow entities is that they're standing there in the room, whether it's in the corner, at the edge of the bed, side of the bed, wherever, um, and you feel their energy, and they wake you up. And because of the natural biological uh, thing with sleep paralysis, sometimes you wake up and you're still paralyzed because that's a natural biological thing, but you see the thing that woke you up, and that is the shadow person. It was their presence that woke you up. Um, and there are plenty of reports as well of people waking up having old hag syndrome, and they can actually move. They're actually not having sleep paralysis. There's an interesting story in my book about one of those incidents from Eric Gerard, and he actually pushed the old hag off of him. It was all a shadow to him. He kind of saw the outline of her body and some hair type features, but basically he grabbed her by the shoulder and threw her off the bed, and he kind of fell onto the floor as well. But she had disappeared once they hit the floor. Uh, so you can some people actually uh, can physically move while still having the old hag on their chest. So then there's the big question, are they evil? And I kind of apologize for the graphic. This was off of a old YouTube video that I had put out there. So the workshop has different stuff that I have with this. But are they evil? So this is a kind of an issue that I have, because there are people out there that will say that shadow people are the darkest of all the dark entities, or the most evil things out there, or that they're just straight up, they're all evil and nefarious. And I definitely don't think that's the case. I think people tend to fear what they don't understand. And yes, it is very creepy when you wake up in the middle of the night and something's standing at the end of your bed. You're naturally going to be scared, because it's something that's uninvited. It's something that is intruding upon you. Certainly very creepy if it's just standing there staring at you. So of course you're naturally going to be frightened of that. But a lot of times they're just standing there and watching. So yeah, creepy, but not necessarily evil. Um, there's a lot of different things that they could be, and different reasons why they could be observing us and watching us. Now, in other cases, like take Tom, the shadow entity at the house in Ohio when I was a teenager. Um, yeah, he was curious. He was peeking his head into the room, but he wanted no interaction whatsoever. Anytime that I would turn, he would take off down the hall. So he didn't really want to do anything nasty. He seemed curious. Or like that one that I talked about with Johnny V's at that restaurant. It was like I scared it when I walked into that kitchen, and it took off. Accordingly, like I had scared it, and it was just running like, oh my gosh. And as I get into like interdimensional beings, I kind of wonder, did it see me as the ghost? Not sure. Where's the shadow? So now all shadow entities are evil. And I told you also about that one with the woman whose son was ill, where it seemed like this was more of an entity that was watching over him and eventually may have given the doctor some advice. So not all of them are evil. Yes, there are. It's a little simplistic, but this is how I view it and what I chalk it up to. Some people are good, like humans. Some humans are good. Some humans are bad. Same thing with shadow people. Some shadow people are good. and some shadow people are bad. So they each have their own agendas, they each have their own personalities. They also have free will. So yeah, some of them are going to be good and some of them are going to be bad. I think most of them are just benign and are watching or observing us and studying us. The shadow people as human spirits. And yeah, some shadow people certainly are human spirits. And, that's kind of a mixed bag because if it's a human spirit, well, right there, some people are good, some people are bad. Even in the afterlife, we see that, we have plenty of friendly ghosts and spirits that are out there. And then we have some real jerks. And it's kind of that whole thing. If they were a jerk in life, well, they're probably still going to be a jerk in the afterlife. And so same thing with shadows. Some of these are actually human spirits. I actually earlier in my career, didn't really believe that. I really compartmentalized that shadow people are just shadow people and human spirits or ghosts are just, they're their own thing. But I had many people over the years um, relate to me stories about, this shadow that they experienced was um, whether it was a historic location, it was actually a human who had once lived there, 150 years ago. My good friend Rob Guttrow, he's a psychic medium, paranormal investigator. He had a fascinating story about his aunt who appeared to him as a shadow because she had used all of her energy trying to get to him, couldn't fully manifest as an apparition, so could only manifest as a shadow, and wanted him to relate a message to his mother for her. And so at some point, I kind of conceded, okay, I've heard enough stories now in enough cases where, fine, some of these uh, shadow people are actually human spirits. But then I finally saw it for myself. And this was only like a year and a half ago at the Mineral Springs Hotel in Alton, Illinois. It's where we hold, well, it's supposed to be our annual Haunted Road Media Paracon, which unfortunately we could not have this past year. Um, but usually, we have the Paracon and then we do the paranormal investigation that Saturday night. Well, we were just winding down the investigation last year, and there's just a handful of us left. We were in the top part of the hotel, which is abandoned, and we were investigating the one corner room up there, which has a confirmed suicide by the name of Pearl. And we've gotten a lot of interaction with Pearl up there before, so we're investigating there, doing some EVP work. And all of a sudden, there's some noises that are coming from down the hall. So I go out to take a look while some of the guys are kind of hanging back and continuing their EVP work. I'm looking down the hall, and there's this black smoke that starts billowing up at the end of the hall. It's like, whoa, okay. And it starts coming closer and closer. And as it is coming closer, it starts to kind of creep up the right side wall and then would creep back down. And as it was coming closer, it would creep back up and then creep back down. And finally, people joined me out in the hall and they, along with me, watch as it morphs into the apparition of a little girl. And there's five of us that see this apparition of a little girl. And we're kind of coaxing her to come closer. And she kind of got a little closer. And she stopped right at this one doorway, which was kind of interesting because in that room of that doorway, were always the stories of a little girl spirit who was there. Now, I investigated in that room several times, never really got much at all. Maybe a faint EVP or two was hard to make out. But other people had told the story of the little girl. And finally, we saw her because she just stopped right at that door and she wasn't going any further. So it was really, really interesting. This illustration here is another one from Adam Tillery, and he actually drew this illustration based on people's accounts of their experiences with the little girl in the room. And it was actually, I think it was a good year later when we actually saw her in the hallway, and she looked very, very similar to this. And what's interesting is that several people, like I said, there were five of us that saw her, but all the accounts were a little different as to what people saw. Like I saw, her head, her face, torso, and then she kind of faded out for me down around the knees. Other people kind of saw the opposite, where they didn't really see her head so much, but the lower half of her body. And there's other theories that I have with that, as far as like personal resonance and people operating at different vibration levels, so they're able to observe different things, which is a completely different conversation and presentation. But it was kind of interesting experience with her. So yes, saw human apparition morph out of the shadows, which is really interesting. Then are some shadow people aliens? Are they extraterrestrials? So I've gotten this question a lot over recent years, and it stands to reason that some of these are, since they're standing there watching us, observing us. A lot of the shadow people stories you hear are also very similar to extraterrestrial and alien abduction stories. They have a lot of similarities between them as far as extraterrestrials coming in the room, standing there watching, observing. Um, the abduction part of it is perhaps a another step as far as the extraterrestrial side, but you do hear sometimes on occasion where a shadow entity is kind of poking and prodding a person. I mean, after all, I had one that kind of crossed my arms across my body. I don't really think that was an extraterrestrial, but there are some similarities between some of the stories. Now, as far as them possibly being extraterrestrial, so how are the shadows actually ETs? Well, if they are traveling through to Earth through another dimension into our plane of existence through maybe a portal from somewhere to here, um, they could. It's possible they're not fully manifesting as they're traveling interdimensionally, and they're only able to manifest as a bit of a shadow. If they're astral, you could even say that they're like astral projecting from wherever they are at to here, and not fully manifesting as their full bodily form, but only as a shadow. Or some people talk about seeing a like a shimmer person, like a shimmer man, and so that could be some of these as well. There's also another idea out there about if they are around the Earth in a some sort of spacecraft, and they're actually sending people down here to watch and observe us, that they're using some sort of cloaking device to do that. And they're standing in our room watching and observing us. But they may not fully understand the physiology of our eyes and how our eyes work. And so what they think is a cloaking device only partially works. And we're still able to see a bit of them as a shadow, or like I said before, maybe even a shimmer. So there are some ways in which these shadows could possibly be ETs. What I think a true shadow person is, a quote unquote true shadow person, are interdimensional beings. I do think that they're either traveling here, uh, from some other dimension into our realm. They're studying us, kind of almost like an ET would be studying us, watching, observing us, taking information. And where I really think this happened, or it could be like a type of time slip. And where I think this really happened was at that restaurant at Johnny V's, where I saw that uh, shadow dart across the kitchen and into that door, but the door didn't move. And what I think happened there was a moment where my dimension and its dimension crossed paths, and we could like dive down the rabbit hole and get into um, how space and time works. But just to keep it kind of surface level here, I think what happened was, as I walked into that kitchen, maybe it saw me as the shadow, maybe it saw me as a ghost, whatever. I scared it, and it took off. Again, it's on a different plane of existence, and I'm only seeing like a glimpse of it. And on its plane of existence, perhaps it blew right through that door, and that door opened wide, and it ran out into the dining room area. But I didn't see that because I'm on my plane of existence. However, sound works on a different frequency, a different wavelength. And so that sound would have been able to travel from one dimension to another, again, being on a different wavelength. And we actually, on the Alaska Triangle, talked about this with a airplane that had gone missing, because there was a radio chatter that could be heard. And so the theory is that the radio chatter came back through the portal. Kind of the same concept here, that we were able to, or at least I was able, well, we, because the people outside uh, in the dining room and up in the bar area could hear it as well. That we were able to hear that sound. We just couldn't see it, which was just really fascinating. But that's why I think that a true shadow person is actually an interdimensional being. And so that wraps up the presentation part of this. So you can find me MikeRicksecker.com, HunterRoadMedia.com. There's the link to the YouTube channel, Hunter Road Media, where you can see a lot of different presentations and videos that I have on shadow people. And I'll be doing the workshop again, which is a much more extensive version of this in January. We did that back in October, but I'll be doing that again in January. And there's the book, A Walk in the Shadows. So, all right. So I will go ahead and end the screen share there. Hope you guys enjoy the presentation. Still with me, Heather? Hello? Hello? I guess it got lost. Not sure. Oh, okay. Well, computer disconnected on Heather. Says we're still live on Facebook. So hopefully she'll pop back in here in a moment. Hang on, let me just message her real quick. So she wants to send me a new link for a Q&A, but it's still live. So I don't know. I can't see anybody on Facebook because I just have the Zoom thing here. So I'm going to tell her that I think she can still connect. All right, she says she's coming back in. All right.
Oh my goodness,
So,
I'm so
sorry about that, everybody. But I do hope you enjoyed the presentation. It's a shame that she got booted, but she'll be back here for the Q&A.
Yep.
So looking forward to the questions that you have, and I would. There's no question. This is a shadow people are an interesting field that we're still studying. Nobody has all the answers, and with all this I've thrown out there, and I say it at the beginning of the book, I reserve the right to change my mind. So as we continue to study and research, there may be some things about this that we end up changing. And I hear somebody. So
yes, can
are you
you hear
back?
me? Yeah, I'm here.
I can hear you. Just can't see you yet.
Okay, well, it's showing on my end, but do you have a few minutes for a few questions?
Okay, there we go. I see you.
Okay.
Yeah, I could take a few questions. Sure.
I thought the whole thing disconnected, so I'm over here screaming at the computer.
Well, it kept me on. It was like, oh, okay, dead air time. What do I do?
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I can take a few questions.
Okay. Sure. One of the questions was, do shadow people have genders such as male or female?
That's a good question. We tend to relate the shadow people to men, to male gender. Like, we talk about the Hat Man. I haven't ever really heard about like the Hat Girl or anything like that. So I say that for some of those types of entities, or what I would call like a kind of quote unquote true shadow person, those interdimensional beings like that. We've only related those to a male gender. But when it comes to the human spirits, like I talked about, Rob Guttrow with his aunt, obviously she was, she was a woman. The little girl that I saw morph from the shadow smoke into the apparition, obviously she was a girl. So the ones that are more human, they can be either or, but it seems like the interdimensional ones we keep relating to more of just the male gender. And I think that happens also, like when we talk about ETs and extraterrestrials, we tend to almost just always lump them into a guy, or almost genderless. But yeah, right now it seems like, we always talk about the Hat Man. So.
And do shadow people actually speak, or do you need a special device to hear them?
Great question. Yeah. Do they have voices? And what's interesting, there's a kind of crazy synchronicity with the universe. I was asked that a couple years ago at a conference. In fact, it was Carl Johnson. You know, it was the first time we'd seen each other in years, and he calls out from the back of the room, "Hey, do shadow people have voices?" And all the years I've been doing this, I hadn't been asked that question. But ever since he asked that question to me, I've been getting all kinds of stories about shadow people with voices. But the thing is, they don't have the physical components to do that. They don't have a mouth because it's all just shadow. You don't usually see eyes or nose or mouth or something like that. Occasionally the red eyes, but yeah, no mouth. So how do they speak? Well, those that have reported hearing their voices, it all seems to be some sort of telepathy or thought transference. So, sometimes when the Hat Man at the end of the bed, sometimes they'll get messages in their minds of what this guy's intentions may be, and usually those are ones that are a little bit more nefarious. That they're telling the person, I want to do something bad to you, or something bad is going to happen to you or your family, or something like that. But again, it's more telepathy or thought transference.
And I know you mentioned that it goes back thousands of years, but do you happen to know when the first reporting of a shadow person was?
Yeah. So ancient civilizations actually have some different legends and ideas, and it's in their it's somewhere in their religion or even in their demonology. Like ancient Sumer, they had a one of their uh, demons. Now, back then, you had good demons and bad demons. You would invoke a good demon to fight a bad demon and things like that. But it was called Alu, and he was one that was more like the old hag, where you would wake up and it would be hovering over you and kind of pressing you on the bed. What's interesting about Alu is it had no limbs, so it was just a head and a body. Very, very strange. But again, a lot of the traits of the old hag syndrome with shadow people. Another one, ancient Egypt. They had several different parts of the soul. One of those was the Kabit, which was the shadow, and the Kabit and the Ka, which was uh, these were the animating forces of the body. The others would go on to Orion and into the afterlife, but these parts, the animating parts of the soul, would actually stay here on Earth and roam around. So you would have a shadow part of your soul around here on Earth. So, we have concepts of these shadows going way, way back.
Okay. And is a black mass similar to something, or a black mist similar to something like a black mass that's very dense, usually like a thick smoke?
Yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about
Okay.
here when we talk about the mist. We're talking about the smoke, cloud. The mist chapter has a whole story or interview with Carl Johnson about the black smoke at the Conjuring House, in his experiences with that on a couple of different occasions now.
And can demons or malevolent entities disguise themselves as shadow people?
Well, I mean, good question. The one demon that I did, the one demon case that I have had was a shadow entity with red eyes. So that's the way it manifested. People will ask about, well, can these things disguise themselves as one thing or another? You'll even hear, can a demon disguise itself as a little girl and trick you? Or people will ask about, the jinn, or the jinn disguise themselves as happy people. We could speculate that they're disguising themselves, or what have you. They do certainly manifest sometimes as a shadow entity. That is not to say all shadow entities are demons. Um, some of them can be. Demons are fewer and far between than Hollywood or TV would like you to believe. Again, I've been doing this for a long, long time. One demon case the entire time.
Hmm. And crawlers, there seems to be more interaction with people. Do they seem to have more energy or be more energy sensitive compared to other shadow people?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, they're certainly not like some of the others that just stand there and are stationary and just watch you. They're certainly a lot more active, a lot more energetic. As far, I mean, they'll just like whir around the room, around the walls and the ceiling. Um, at St. Joseph's Hospital up here in Lorraine, when you used to be able to investigate there, there's been a few people there that ran into a crawler in the psych ward, and it would come out as a like almost like a humanoid figure, and then would drop down on all fours and chase after people. So it definitely seems to be more active for sure.
Okay. And can a crawler turn into an old hag?
Oh, interesting question. Um, huh. Usually, what happens with the old hag is people wake up and it's sitting on their chest. They don't usually report, seeing the thing crawl around the ceiling and then drop on their chest like that. Um, and then, like I said, with the one story with Eric, he was able to push the thing off his chest and then it just disappeared. So yeah, uh, I don't usually hear it happening that way, where it's the crawler becoming the old hag sitting on their chest. I mean, I'm not going to say that doesn't happen at all. I just haven't really heard stories like that before.
And can pets such as dogs or cats see shadow people that we can't? And can shadow people play with pets?
Oh, interesting question. And I'm surprised it didn't get asked. Are some shadow people or some shadows animals, or can there be shadow animals? But yeah, that was kind of the interesting thing there with Jasmine the cat at that house in Edmond, was that it stopped right in that door because it saw the shadow and was like, nope, I'm having none of this, and was out of there. So yeah, animals are very, very sensitive to the supernatural. They can see and sense things that we don't. And so, um, what was going on with Jasmine in that instance, because she was already skittish around the house, so she was feeling what was going on in that bedroom, that energy was welling up in there and forming the black mist, and then we actually saw it. So yeah, they are extremely sensitive to all things, paranormal, supernatural. And then I'll just throw out there real quick that yeah, there are shadow animals as well. People report seeing shadow cats, shadow dogs, shadow snakes, shadow spiders, all different varieties of animal shadows.
And then have you ever reached out and touched a black mist or a shadow person?
Well, I had the one that actually touched me when I was a kid, so that's the only physical interaction that I've had with one. Now, I have felt the energy of some of these shadows that I have encountered. So, and I didn't tell all my personal shadow stories here because I've had a lot of experiences, but there are certainly times where you walk into the room, you see the shadow, and you feel the energy in that moment. That black mist was one where I certainly felt heavy at the time. There's another time, uh, there was out in the woods, I'm seeing all these shadows form around the trees, and that got really heavy and dark. And then when the shadow entity, when I was the first incident that I had, where it actually took me by the wrists and crossed my arms across my body, I certainly felt that. But again, it felt just like anybody else touching me. It didn't feel like anything special. It didn't feel cold. Didn't feel electric. Anything like that. People always ask me about it. It just felt like anybody else.
And have shadow people ever been confused with an incubus or a succubus?
Well, some of these shadows could possibly be an incubus or a succubus, especially when we start talking about old hag syndrome and things like that. Some of these could actually be those type of entities. Again, not all of them are, but some of them could certainly be.
And then back to the dog question, can shadow people make things appear, such as a ball for a dog?
Um, yeah, I'm not so sure about manifesting something out of thin air like that. Can we just make a ball appear? I haven't seen it do things like that, and I haven't really heard stories about them just making things appear. That's not to say that it couldn't happen. We are talking about many of these being interdimensional beings, and we hear stories all the time about things going missing around the house and then just appearing out of thin air. And I've seen that happen, not with a shadow person case, but in another other cases where we're investigating hauntings. I'll just tell a story real quick. Um, it was a case in which there was a child spirit that was there at the house, and the one investigator in our group started talking about, if you want to play with my keys here, you can go ahead and play with my keys. And after a while, we kind of forgot about that whole offer of the keys. And later on, as we're packing up, trying to put things away, he couldn't find his keys. Where did his keys go? And we're looking around all over the place. They were eventually found in one of our cases, where we put equipment. And I had specifically looked in that case twice. You start looking in places over and over again. And twice it was sitting on the kitchen table. I'm looking at it, it's not here. It went off into the other room, came back, looking through it again. It's not here, went away. And then one of the other investigators came along. Hey, they're right here in the case. It's one of the things that was said was, okay, if you took the keys, please, return them. And they ended up in the case. So we know that happens where, a physical object can be taken away like that and represented. But I really haven't experienced that with shadow people. And again, I haven't really heard stories like that from shadow people either.
Okay. And then another question came through that says, have you experienced more shadow people at private residences or at historical locations?
Good question. Kind of a mixed bag. I've never really tried to put a count on it. I've seen them in both places, at people's houses, at my own house, and also at historic locations. So I can't say that it's, greater at one than the other. Yeah.
And I guess this is from me personally, because when I do a lot of investigations, I would say 90% of the time they've been in shadow form. Mm-hmm. Would that be just the apparition couldn't fully manifest and that's how I see it? Or would those be classified as shadow people?
Okay. So, yeah, I call those shadows, but not necessarily a shadow person. What I classify a shadow person or a true shadow person is an interdimensional being. Yeah, a lot of times human spirits can't fully manifest as an apparition and only come off as a shadow. There's also, I kind of briefly mentioned it before, the idea of our own personal resonance, our own personal vibration, in that because we resonate at a certain level, we're able to see, specific entities differently. So like, I'm a person who sees more shadows than apparitions, where other people see more apparitions than shadows. And I think that's just the way our own personal vibration is. Now, that doesn't mean that if you see more shadows, you're a darker person or vibrating on a lower level or something like that. It's just, how your makeup is. And I think that's why, at times we're able to interact with some of these other dimensions and some of these other points in time, is because and we don't know what the catalyst is, but for some reason, those two vibrations are able to sync up and resonate at the same level. And all of a sudden, we see something or we experience something, that's a little bit different from that other dimension or point in time.
Okay. And don't see any other questions, but another question I do have for you is, do you mind telling us about your Ireland trip and if you still have room?
Yeah. There are 7 spots still available. That is next July 1st through the 9th. And we're going to be all over. We're starting, the place we're staying the most at is actually a haunted hotel, which is great. First day is going to be like Blarney Castle. So we'll be kissing the Blarney Stone, and they are spraying it down and all that stuff. So we don't have to worry about that. Yeah, we're going to be visiting, I think there's like 7 different castles we are exploring on this trip. One of the very last one is going to be Lepp Castle. Drombeg Stone Circle, very ancient historic location. We'll be doing that. We're also going to be investigating an overnight at Spike Island, which is basically the Alcatraz of Ireland. We're going to have that island to ourselves that night. So that's going to be absolutely amazing. And we're also going to be making a stop at the Jameson Distillery, which is also haunted. So that's in there too. It's going to be absolutely fascinating time. So yeah, only 7 spots left. So I'm going to hurry up. You get there through mysteriousAdventures.com or mysteriousAdventurestours.com or hauntedjourneys.com also has the link.
Okay, yeah, I'll make sure I share the link to the page with your bio when I do that. And Phil just messaged. You said that you're welcome to come back anytime with any of your other presentations. We loved it. We had a great time. Oh, hold on one second. Have you ever seen just a face like no neck or body or anything else.
Yeah, I mean that happens sometimes, where you only see like a specific body part. It might be an arm or a leg, might be a face, something like that. Um, and it's just for whatever reason they're not able to fully, you know, take an entire form. But yeah, sometimes we just only see a body part.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. And
Yeah,
I want to
absolutely.
thank
Thank you for having me.
everybody. Oh, you're so welcome. I really enjoyed it. I actually learned some stuff and I've watched all your videos. So there's some things that I picked
Thank
up
you.
on that I haven't caught before. And thank you everyone for watching us. This is Ghost Education 101. And we were going to take a break for the rest of the year, but we do have a last minute schedule. Come back on December 16th. The time's going to be 9:30 p.m. instead of 9. And we are going to be joined with Bishop Long, who will be talking about demons and demonology. So we will see you guys then. Thank you for joining us.